Well, I hope you have all the details straightened out because it's time to get into our Sunday school lesson, everybody. So I think I've said it before. Once I get done with prep for the Bible conference, I'm going to go full force into routing actual internet throughout the rest of the building. And so probably about April-ish, expect for us to go back to the old room, okay? So anyways, we're working on it. It's just one step at a time. If I was a little bit more ahead in my conference prep, then maybe I could do it. But today, let's not worry about that. Let's worry about the Last Days series and session number, that should be 27 actually. I left, it's titled correctly on your notes. I missed correcting it right here, but session number 27, we're going to be looking at the war and the woman. The war and the woman. So we'll be wrapping up Revelation 12. And then we're going to get into the very first verse of Revelation 13. And there's a good reason why we're only going to go to the first verse. Okay? So, let me open us up a word of prayer and then we'll get into it. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to have access to your word, that you have provided it for us for our knowledge, our understanding. God, I pray that we would read it with the reverence and the honor that it is due, that we would rightly divide it, carefully and precisely handling it, Lord. And with that, may you have the honor in our doing so. And we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. Now, go ahead and turn to Revelation chapter 12, and let's start in verse 7. What we had up to this point is we saw the woman who had the sun above her head, the moon at her feet, 12 stars. This is the woman Israel. She gives birth to the Messiah, and then there's the dragon. He's waiting to devour the child as soon as she delivers, and then once the child is delivered, he is taken up into heaven. This is obviously Christ, and the woman flees into the wilderness, where she's going to be for 1,203 score days, 1,260 days, which is the second half of those 7 years of tribulation, so 3.5 years. Now, what we're going to see here in chapter 12, verse 7 is the war in heaven. Now, I really think what's going to be interesting is as we work through this, the information and the details that we're given is actually going to help us understand some more of the timeline. So we're kind of filling in more of the picture, more of the puzzle as we're working through this. So verse 7, it says, "And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels." Now, Michael, if you think, okay, I've heard of Michael before, Michael the archangel, what have you, that's the angel that came and helped the messenger to Daniel. So you may recall in the book of Daniel, a messenger of the Lord appears, an angel says, "I would have been here sooner, but the prince of Persia prevented me. Michael came, he fought against him as well, and now I'm able to deliver this message to you." So we've seen Michael mentioned before. Now, Michael, who is, I'm going to call him one of the princes of the angels, maybe he's one of the captains in the Lord's army. Satan is going to fight against Michael and his angels. Now notice there's angels aligned with Satan as well, those that have followed him, the dragon. They are going to fight, but he will not prevail. All right? In verse 8, the dragon is going to be cast down, and this dragon is in fact Satan himself. If we read here in verse 8, "And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven," no place for Satan to be. I'll remind you, there were times in the past, like for the example, the book of Job. I take Job literally. I know I'm just a silly old hick from Oklahoma. But it says that Satan was able to go before the Lord in heaven and accuse Job. The whole charge was, if you take away all his blessings, he'll curse you to your face, right? So with that, Satan in the past, and as far as now, what's going on now, I can't tell you for certain, but as far as the times past, Satan has had access to heaven. He could go up and he could speak to the Lord, but there's coming a point in the future when he will make his attack and attempt to take heaven. Now, I would say this is probably what his primary objective is. We do have some commentary about Satan in, I believe it's the book of, I think it's Isaiah. But it's, how thou art fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning. Thou said, I will place my throne above God. And he wants to claim the throne. And I think that's what the battle that we're seeing here is. Satan is going to take his angels. They're going to fight against the armies of God, the angels of God, to attempt to take the throne of God. He is not going to be successful. And verse 9 makes it very clear that this is Satan. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now, I am going to take this to be a future event. I don't think that this is something that happened a long, long time ago. I think this is a future battle for heaven that will take place. And there's going to be some key reasons why I take that view, as you'll see here in just a little bit. Now, when he is cast to earth, the earth becomes his focus. The serpent, Satan, the dragon, he's taking his eyes off of heaven. He's going to focus on wreaking havoc on the earth, okay? And that brings us to the next part of chapter 12. The war in heaven leads to the time being short, all right? The time is short. Aren't y'all just like on the edge of your seat to see like what little graphic I'm going to do next? I'm so proud of myself. So with that, he's going to have a short time to carry out his wrath, his evil upon the earth. So we get to verse 10. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of His Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. The word Satan in Hebrew, it does mean accuser. He accused Job. He accuses others. That's the role he plays. That God, if you take away blessings from man, men will turn their back on you. And so this is kind of a victory cry to a degree. I don't know who the voice is. It does say our brethren. Is this the 24 elders? I'm not sure, but the voice makes a declaration that does sound like victory. Now, I do want to be careful in how we handle these words here. The tribulation's not over yet, okay, when they utter these words, because Satan has been cast to the earth, and this is where I think we're going to see the great tribulation, the last half of the 7 years begin. So we're not done yet. Things are not over. Don't read verse 10 and think there's the victory speech, it's all said and done. What I'm going to say is, I think the best way to take it is, this is Satan's fate being sealed. He made his play for heaven. He tried to take the throne. He failed to take the throne. And now all he can do, all that's left, is for him to kill, steal, destroy for a little while on earth. That's all that he can do after this. Once he's defeated in the battle for heaven, now his fate is sealed. The clock is ticking, and he has very little time. In verse 11, it says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. Now, these are the brethren. These are the ones that have been afflicted by Satan. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. Now, that is very much reminiscent of Jesus' words in Matthew when he says, for whosoever shall save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. That's one of those verses that when we read it in how it's commonly handled in churches, it's always made figurative. Well, if you're willing to sacrifice your life for the sake of the gospel, and typically what they mean is, be the outcast at the, table at lunch because you're not having those worldly conversations. You are going to be righteous. You're going to pray before your meal, right? And so you poor persecuted Christians, losing your life. You're giving up the things that you want in this world. You're not going to pursue selfish, wicked, temporary pleasure. You're going to live for a greater and higher purpose. That's kind of how it's presented. And I'm not saying that's a bad principle to follow, wanting to live for a greater purpose. The point is, I think Jesus was being very serious when he said those things, and we have the exact example right here in front of us. This is an example of people who lost their lives for the sake of Christ and the gospel. Now, the gospel, when I say that, not ours today, but the hope of endure to the end, be obedient, and you will receive the kingdom gospel. And so these are those exact people. If they had strived to save their lives, what would they have done? Well, I'm going to get in line with the guy wielding the sword and persecuting people. But that's not what they did. They lost their lives. They did not love their lives. They loved not their lives unto the death. That's what I meant to say, as verse 11 declares. Now, I think these are going to be the martyrs. If we recall, going back to the fifth seal. Remember the book. We had the 7 seals. The fifth seal was the martyrs under the altar. And they said, how long until you avenge our lives? Till you avenge us, O Lord. And so these are the martyrs that is being spoken of here. They've not loved their lives unto the death. Now, verse 12. According to verse 12, it says, therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. So rejoice for those in heaven. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. Now, we will talk about the sea there, because there will be some future passages where sea does have a metaphorical or figurative meaning to it. But remember, we let the Bible determine those things. We don't just make up allegory out of nothing. There's got to be some textual reason. So when you see the word sea there, S-E-A, it could be waters, but also it may have another meaning to it. So we'll just pay attention as we go. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Satan knows the prophecies, I would say. He knows that the great tribulation he's going to carry out is only going to be allowed for so long. So even he himself at that point will know there is a limited amount of time, okay? And in one sense, you could almost say Satan is backed into a corner, right? And what do we know about any animal backed into a corner? They will fight more ferocious than ever before, and I think that's what we're going to see in these final days of the last days. And by days, I mean 3.5 years. So with that, time is short. We are now going to look at the woman's flight, okay? The woman's flight. So there you go. You got the sun, the 12 stars, and the moon, right? We get to verse 13. It says, and when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Now, once again, I'm going to take this as a future event. And this is one of the key reasons, because when he's cast to the earth, this is when he begins to persecute the woman that brought forth the man-child. Now, there's been persecution for Israel for a long time. You can go back and you can read in the Old Testament there was persecution when they were enslaved in Egypt. There was persecution for them when they were in the land, the times of the judges, you name it. But what we're going to see here is unlike anything else. And this is when the remnant of the woman, or the woman herself, but there's going to be a number, which I believe is that 144,000, they will be taken away and kept safe from the persecution of the dragon, all right? Once again, the book of Revelation, there's a lot of different views. There is that preterist view that all this has happened in the past. Satan has already been cast down to the earth. He has been carrying out persecution against the woman, but what do they have to do? It is a spiritualization of it. So the woman is not Israel, it is all believers. The persecution of the churches, the persecution of Christianity, that's what they do. I'm saying, no, let's rightly divide. Let's take it for what it says. This is a future day when God will be dealing with Israel. And so, verse 14, it says, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Now, a few things there. This cannot help but remind us of some Scripture to a degree. It says she's going to be given 2 wings of a great eagle. You may remember there is a passage in Isaiah, now bears me up on eagle's wings. I think that is prophetic of the day that God takes the woman, Israel, the 144,000, delivers them into the wilderness. And it says that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished. She's going to be provided for. She's not just on her own. This is a divine, miraculous, I would say, rescue. When I see the words, two great wings, I really do think that she is going to be saved in a miraculous, divine way. Israel will be almost, transported from one place to the other. That's kind of the picture I have. And this is very reminiscent of being in the wilderness. Much of the language that is going to be used for these 144,000 who are fleeing from the Antichrist, I think you can see reflects some of what they experienced in the wilderness. They will be kept. They will be fed. Well, what did God do for Israel? He provided for them. He brought them, He provided manna, He provided quail, He provided water from the rock. Their clothes did not wear out during the 40 years in the wilderness. I could be stretching it a little bit, but 42 months is the length of time for 3.5 years. They were in the wilderness for 40 years, so there's maybe a little bit even reflection there. I don't want to tell you that's exactly correct, but there is nonetheless a lot of similarity. Now, it does say in verse 14 that she will be nourished for a time and times and half a time, and she will be kept from the face of the serpent. I want you to think about the word time, times, and half a time. The Greek word for it is kairos, for time, and then there's the plural form of kairos, which is times. Now, the Greek word doesn't have it's not a specific measurement of length, okay? It's not like kairos means 6 months, 3 days, any particular, 24 seconds. It just means it's a time, it's a season, it's a certain amount, okay? But not an exact measurement. What I will say is we've already been given a number of times a specific amount of time previously. If we go back to the beginning of chapter 12, I believe it's in the beginning of chapter 12. I don't have this written down in my notes, but I should be able to find it in just a second. Yeah, verse 6 of chapter 12. And the woman fled into the wilderness. Where's God going to take the woman when the serpent comes upon the earth? To the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. 1,260 days. Once again, that aligns perfectly with the 3.5 years. So therefore, once again, I think we're seeing that this is the latter half of the tribulation. This is that second half. Remember, the 2 olive trees will be prophesying during those 1,260 days. So when I get over here and I see times, and half a time, and it's still all in the frame of Israel being taken to the wilderness where she will be cared for, guess what I'm going to interpret it as? 1,260 days. I think it's pretty straightforward. Now, also, think about how it's listed. A time, times, half a time. We've continued talking about 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. It's not a stretch to say, okay, we have kairos, singular, kairos, plural, and then half a kairos. If the kairos there, the kairos could be anything, right? Just kind of like how a dozen could be something. It's a dozen eggs, a dozen apples, a dozen fire trucks. Kairos, if it's a time being a year, plural, years, and half a year. I think we're coming up with 3.5 years here. I don't think that's much of a stretch. So once again, this is still reinforcing those latter half of the tribulation. And then we get to verse 15. It says, and the serpent cast out of his mouth mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Now, once again, I'm telling you, consider the possibilities. The word flood obviously is tied to water. The word sea tied to water. There is some figurative language in Revelation regarding the seas, the waters. This could be a physical flood. Also, maybe the serpent is unleashing an army. Maybe Satan is unleashing warriors to go and hunt and kill Israel. That's entirely possible. And if we are staying with kind of the picture of the wilderness, and the earth helped the woman, let's read on in here. It says, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Now remember, we've already talked about the Antichrist some. We think the Antichrist is going to be Jewish, very possibly of the tribe of Dan. It's almost like an inward rebellion within Israel. Do y'all recall a sermon we preached on about Korah and Korah's rebellion? And Korah wanted to, this was when Israel was in the wilderness, wanted to overthrow Moses as the leader and Aaron and take charge. And long story short, God said, no, Korah, you're not going to overthrow. You will not lead a rebellion against Moses. And what did the earth do? The earth opened up and it swallowed Korah and all those that were with him. Once again, we're just speculating a little bit, but you got to admit there is some similarity there. So maybe if this flood is the armies of the serpent going after Israel, perhaps we're going to see the earth open up again, swallow them again. Now, we get down to verse 17, and the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. This almost sounds to me like you have another group, the remnant of her seed. So there's the woman, which I believe is the 144,000. Remember, all the way back in chapter, I think it's 7, the woman is sealed, right? The 144,000 are sealed, and they will be protected during the entire course of the tribulation, okay? That's what the sealing is for. This group, though, is the remnant of her seed. Remember, we've talked about how there will be others who live in the tribulation who will not bow down to the Antichrist, but they will not be divinely protected. They will have to endure to the end, whether that's making it to the tribulation or making it through it or losing their lives, the martyrs. I think what we're saying here is, okay, the woman's going to slip through his fingers. She's going to get to the wilderness. His flood will not get her. He cannot harm her. But there are still those that have not been sealed in the wilderness or in the world who he can then turn his guns toward, and maybe in a very literal way. And he will afflict those, the remnant of her seed, the ones that are not sealed of the 144,000, but those that still are aligned with God. Maybe they put 2 and 2 together during the course of things after the sealing already took place. This is some speculation here, but I think we've got 2 different groups. Both of those will enter into the kingdom, whether by being kept in the 144,000 or losing their life for the sake of the gospel, because they keep the commandments and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Once again, some of this is speculation, but I think that is a pretty solid outline for us. Now we get to chapter 13, and let's connect the dots, okay? Let's connect some dots, and I'm only going to read verse 1. We get to Revelation 13, verse 1, and says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now remember, we've seen the reference to 7 heads and 10 horns before. This is the dragon, representation of him. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. This is the beast. Now, there are some variations in manuscripts that may say the beast stood upon the sand of the sea. I'm not worried about that right now. I'm persuaded that what we have here in the King James is the correct version. But what I want you to note is, when does the beast show up? We've had the beast referenced back in chapter 11, I'll remind you. If we go back to Revelation chapter 11, remember the two olive trees who were prophesying. Verse 7 says, And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. So the beast will kill the two prophets when? Remember, it's at the end of those 3.5 years. So we have a beast, but the beast, as far as in the order of things, as all this is playing out, does not come on the scene until after Satan is cast down to the earth. All right? And that's significant, I think. That the beast only shows up once Satan is cast down upon the earth. I want us to do a little bit of speculation here. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Bill, you're such a jabberjaw. It's okay. She can stay. She can stay. That was not code word for get her out of here. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and I want you to look at verses 3 through 7, okay? Talking about the day of Christ. I'll even read verse 2. That ye be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. This is referring to the Antichrist, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember, Paul is saying this will not happen. The day of Christ will not come until you have the son of perdition. But then you get to verse 5. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things. And now ye know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. Now, I know that's some King James language there, but you can follow along with me. There is something withholding the son of perdition. He is being prevented from being revealed. What could be withholding him? Now, this is not it's not a person. The Greek language is precise. There's not a person withholding him. It's a thing. What withholdeth him? And that he may be revealed in his time. Verse 7, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let. Once again, let me help you out here if you're struggling a little. The word let means there is resistance, okay? There's resistance there. He that letteth resists will let. That's why you have to ask your parents if they'll let you get an ice cream, because there's an obstacle in your way. In tennis, I was listening to Terrence McLean. I don't know if y'all know who that is, but he was giving a lecture. And when you hit the tennis ball and it hits the net and goes over, what do you call it? It's a let ball, right? It was let by the net. Long story short to say, there is, in this passage, he who now letteth will let, being restrained, being kept, until he be taketh out of the way. Okay? I want us to go to Peter now. If we go to 1 Peter chapter 3, let's start putting some things together. So what we know is the son of perdition, the Antichrist, is being withheld at this time. And it's only until it is taken out of the way that he will be revealed. 1 Peter chapter 3, when we read verse... here in your notes, verse 19. It says, but which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison. This is talking about Christ once he had been put to death and quickened by the Spirit. Verse 20, and these spirits that in prison, which sometime were disobedient, when once the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. Now, let's try to put some of this together. The Antichrist, the son of perdition, is being withheld at this moment. He's being withheld by something. And then he that letteth will let, being restricted, being obstructed until he is taken out of the way. There are spirits described in 1 Peter as being in prison. Now, what's this prison? Where is this prison? Furthermore, they were as in the days of Noah. We do know from Noah there were the sons of God who took daughters unto men. There were the Nephilim born unto them. I believe is an act of rebellion against God by Satan and his fallen angels. If we go back to Revelation chapter 11, one more time I'll remind you, Revelation verse 7, and the 2 olive branches, and when they shall have finished their testimony against the beast, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit. Let's just think about that for a moment. What withholds the son of perdition, the Antichrist? It's something. There are spirits in prison. I think, this is my theory, the bottomless pit is the thing that withholds the Antichrist today. That he was rebelling against God, placed into the prison, placed into the bottomless pit. Now, how does he get out? Revelation chapter 13, I'll remind you, Satan goes to war against Michael and his angels. He is unsuccessful and cast down to the earth. Let's go and read Revelation 9:1. Revelation 9:1 says, and the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Verse 2, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. My theory is, and feel free to study for yourselves, I think the spirit of the Antichrist is bound within the bottomless pit. He's being kept in, shut up along with the other disobedient spirits. Once Satan is cast from heaven, he will be allowed to open the bottomless pit, the thing that's withholding the Antichrist. And then he that letteth will let until he taketh out of the way. The bottomless pit will be opened. We know an army will come upon the earth and torment men, but also the Antichrist will be released. This is at the midway point, I think, when we get to this point. We're at the midway point in the tribulation. So now we know we've got 3.5 years left. The beast arrives. He's on the scene. We get to Revelation 13. Now, the only thing that may cause a little bit of confusion is, but we've already had the rider on the white horse. That was the very first seal. When you open the first seal, we had the white horse, and he went forth to conquer and to conquer, or conquering and to conquer. How is it that we have the Antichrist in the first seal, and now you're saying he doesn't show up until much, much later on? The 5th seal, even. Well, at the 5th trumpet, anyways. Here's my position. What if the rider on the white horse is initially just a man, a world leader, okay? And he goes forth, he begins to conquer, he gains power, he gains esteem, he gains prestige. The world starts to follow him. And then, once you get to the 5th trumpet, and Satan releases the Antichrist out of the pit, then the spirit of the Antichrist enters into this world leader, and then he becomes the Antichrist embodied in the flesh. Now you may say, that sounds really far-fetched. I don't quite know where your grounds are for that. But let me remind you, if we go to the Gospel of John, and I don't have this written down. I should have put it down in my notes. But when we read the Gospel of John and Jesus is in the upper room with the disciples, we find this passage of Scripture right over here. It's somewhere going to be in, I think, chapter 13. All right, John chapter 13, verse 21. John 13, 21. Let's consider this passage. When Jesus had thus said, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. The disciples looked at one another, doubting of whom he spake. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of the disciples whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him that he should ask who it should be of whom he spake. He then, lying on Jesus' breast, said unto him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop, when I have dipped it. And when he dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Verse 27. And after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then Jesus said unto him, That thou doest, do quickly. We have already had the precedent set that Satan can embody someone. When he embodied Judas, Judas betrayed him. When you read in the garden, when Satan, Freudian slip there, Judas walks up to Jesus and says, Master, and kisses him on the cheek, that is Satan embodying Judas at the moment. It's not just Judas giving the Lord a kiss. That is Satan betraying him in that moment. So I don't think it's outside the scope of theology at all to say when the bottomless pit is opened, the spirit of the Antichrist is released and able to enter into this world leader, the rider on the white horse, and then will begin the great tribulation. Revelation 13 will be the passage of the mark of the beast. It will be the passage of him afflicting the people on the earth who do not take his mark, do not worship him. And so with that, we're trying to connect the dots there, but I think as we go forward, I think the picture becomes a little more clear as to how this is going to all play out. So did you get her to go to sleep? Almost. You have any questions before I let you go? We covered a lot today, but I was trying to be ambitious to get it done. Otherwise, we're going to be in Revelation a long time. Yeah.
So it's real funny. My dad actually, I'm going to show you this picture that's on his phone. So him and his brother have been talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny that this is what we're talking about. It's just, it all happens.
Yeah.
So the man of lawlessness.
Yes.
Is he the Antichrist or no?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
You think so? Okay.
Yes. I would say with certainty. The man of lawlessness, the son of perdition, these are all multiple titles for the same. And once again, Satan mirrors Christ in a lot of ways. Remember, he will be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father. And so Satan has these various titles. Satan, dragon, serpent. The Antichrist is the man of lawlessness, the son of perdition. The people, or the prince that should come. That's a term Daniel uses to describe him. So yeah, I think so. Is it coming out of 2 Thessalonians? Yep, that's it. So yeah, that's a passage teaching that right now the Antichrist cannot come upon the earth because he is being withheld. Now, with that being said, is it possible that the man whom the Antichrist will possess is already on the earth? That is possible. That could be true today, but it's not until the rapture takes place and then he is revealed that all these things are going to unfold. So, anyways, all right. Yeah?
All right, at the beginning, you said that the devil talked to God, like he was in heaven.
Yes.
Okay. I thought that God could not even look upon evil, like he turned his back on Jesus, like all that other stuff, so how could he?
That's an interesting point you make. One of the things is that phrase, I'm trying to think of where it might come from. I wish I had my computer up in front of me so I could search the line. one of the things is a lot of times those statements like the Lord cannot look upon evil and whatever exactly in the text it says, it comes from the Psalms, it comes from some very like specific passages. And sometimes we will be quick to just read that line and then kind of make that the rule. The issue is when we do make that line, the Lord can't look upon evil. I mean, God did look upon the earth in Genesis 6 and saw how man's thoughts were evil and wicked continually. So while we say on one hand, the Lord can't look upon evil, but then there's all these times where God looked upon Nineveh in that sense and said, their wickedness has come up before me. So I think we have to consider maybe it's more of a statement of God will not tolerate it. At least at some point, he will reach the degree where he says, I will intervene in some way. So I think that's the best way to take it there. I was trying to think, there's another phrase we will often say. Sometimes we'll say when Adam sinned, man was separated from God. And then we go ahead and we read the next 65 books how man spoke to God, how God continued to deal with man. God appeared to Abraham, God appeared to, or Moses, and on and on and on it goes. So there's phrases that we'll say, but then it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe we've taken a line and then we built this whole idea around, and maybe we need to reanalyze it. It's a good question, though, because it's one we always hear. But yeah, in the book of Job, Satan goes before God. He accuses Job. I'm trying to think if there's other times in particular where Satan is clearly given access to God. We know Satan tempts Christ. Christ goes into the wilderness for the 40 days. Once again, kind of a mirroring there of Israel. And so yeah, that's a good question. All right, well, I got to let you go now, otherwise we're going to run out of time. Let me close out in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for the opportunity we've had once again to study your word. Certainly, there's so much here in Revelation, and I did not go into the full depth and detail it deserves, but we're trying to get a good overall picture of what's to pass. Lord, I pray that we would have confidence in your word, not feeling the need to spiritualize when not necessary, and just trust that these things will come to fruition. But I'm thankful that we live in the age that the son of perdition, the spirit of the Antichrist, is being kept and held in prison. And with that, may we share the good news of the gospel that we have today. And we ask these things in Jesus' name, amen. There's a little booklet I need to let y'all see sometime. My friend, Dr. White, he wrote a booklet called The Antichrist is Alive But Not Well Today. And what I talked to you today, that's where I got a lot of it from, is his resource. It makes sense to me.